Future Now Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
I'm James Dorsey. I'm a senior fellow at the RAJARATNAM School of International Studies in Singapore, and I'm the co-director of the Institute of Fan Culture at the University of Würzburg in Germany. Well, I think what we're witnessing goes beyond the Muslim world, which is that we're in a decade which I would define as a decade of defiance and dissent, which is that population groups across the globe have essentially lost confidence in whatever political system they live in, as well as in the traditional political leadership. And you've seen that for the last 5 or 6 years, whether that was student demonstrations in Santiago de Chile, Occupy Wall Street, the popular Arab revolts, fuel protests in Indonesia. And in 2016, that's obviously come strong to the forefront with the rise of populism, Brexit, the rise of Donald Trump, and a movement that's been going on for now at least 5 or 6 years of change in the Middle East. A lot of this change may not be change that one likes, depending on one's position towards populist leaders in the West or in Turkey. And certainly there would be probably largely universal agreement on a rejection of the Islamic State. Nonetheless, those are, in a sense, revolutionary forces in the definition that they aim to fundamentally change society, state structure, the way one lives. And I think this is a long-term process. It's a long-term process globally. Obviously, Trump has been elected for 4 years. Brexit is a process that's going to take on the process of change in the Muslim world, and particularly in the Middle East, is not going to be one that is going to end, even if one were to militarily defeat the Islamic State and deprive it of a territorial base. First of all, to be fair to the EU, is they've had a massive onslaught of refugees fleeing Africa and Asia, including the Middle East, in numbers that probably were unprecedented post-World War II. And any nation, group of nations, whether or not they have a history of being immigration nations or not, like most of Europe, would have had great difficulty accommodating those numbers. Having said that, the cause for the migration is obviously first and foremost the result of domestic situations in these countries, failed economic policies, failed social policies, and people are fleeing everything from warfare to very autocratic regimes that make it impossible to fork out not only an economic life, but also a reasonable social life. But having said that, these are all states that also were supported, or governments, regimes, that were supported by the West. And sure, there was pressure to improve human rights, whatever, but that pressure was never serious. And so these regimes got away with it, and there's a consequence of the policy. Now, the analogy that I'm drawing is you have the equivalent in the West. One of the things that is fueling the rise of populism is that you have whole areas of the Rust Belt in the United States, areas of northern England, areas of northern France, and so on, who have become economically disadvantaged as a result of a failure to provide economic alternatives for regions that have lost out economically, and now you're getting payback. So what the solution to all of this is really policies that think ahead and that ensure that all groups in society are included, that you don't have significant groups that are excluded, feel marginalized, and no longer feel that they have a stake in society. So in the West, the response is vote for populists. In Africa and Asia, the response is vote with your feet. China's a rising power. It may be a process of 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards in a Leninist sense, but China is a rising power. I think one of the key issues for China is going to be that the basis on which its foreign policy, its defense policy has long been based, so principles of non-interference, of win-win economic situations, of harmony, all of that you're seeing China gradually throw out the window, and the Middle East is actually a driver in that. Because what the Chinese will learn, and are learning very slowly, is that one, because China is rising and ultimately will be a superpower, the expectations of it are different from any other economic partner, first of all. But second of all, China's interests in terms of its economic interests on the supply side, so all kinds of resources that it is dependent on in terms of imports and the security of those imports and supplies, as well as massive Chinese investment outside of China, and a vast number and growing number of Chinese who live and work overseas and whose security China is responsible for, will mean that they will have to go far beyond simply economic relations with various countries. And you're already seeing that happen in countries like Djibouti, like Afghanistan. I think it's important to realize that we are in an era of flux and of change. And there will be vast and very deep divisions on what that change should entail and what the nature of that change, and in which the nature of the societies that we live in is going to be shaped for some time to come.